SOCOM, a name that will forever bring nostalgia and fond memories to those that had the classics on PS2 and PSP. In an era and time when shooters were all about the blow everything up types of action, SOCOM US Navy SEALs was the project of a team of devs that both wanted to shed a light on the real-life situations of what the SEAL teams went through, and also give a more simulated experience of what life in the military and that of traveling around the world to undisclosed locations to stop some of the biggest threats that, if done properly, the public would never even know existed. Now, I know most videos at this point start to deep dive into the multiplayer experience and how SOCOM 1 was one of the first games to break the barriers of online gaming on consoles, especially for PlayStation. Some will also look at this to be a documentary or showcase of what SOCOM was, which this is a bit of that, but I also wanted to give a blueprint, if you will, for any devs out there wanting to make the next SOCOM, or for any dev teams that PlayStation Studios wants to give the go-ahead to make a new game. I will also go into details if we should get remasters, remakes, or full-on reboot of SOCOM in the future, or if the series was just right place, right time, and a product of its time too much to the point of warranting a comeback at all after the rough, online-only design choices of the past, and a version of SOCOM that had very little to do with the namesake of the series and would inevitably be its downfall. Before we go into a blueprint of the future, we're going to the past to see just what made SOCOM a main staple of the PlayStation lab for all those years.
The SEALs use darkness as cover and most often want to stay out of sight, so they work in teams as small as 2, 4, 8, or 16. They're almost always outnumbered. But on their side is speed, stealth, and surprise. They're trained to arrive and leave quickly and quietly, operating by sea, air, and land. That's why they're called SEALs. Job duties? They're likely to be among the first Americans sent into a hot zone. Sometimes they stay out of sight just to see what's going on and report back. Other times they might strike in a lightning-fast raid, rescuing hostages or stopping terrorists. While no experience is necessary to join, being physically fit and comfortable in the water is an advantage. Once in the program, candidates get some of the most comprehensive military training in the world.
Before there was the modern warfare eras of Call of Duty, Medal of Honor, Rainbow Six Siege, PUBG, or Battlefield games, a series was made with the help of military personnel, the funding of Sony Computer Entertainment, and what was, at the time, a third-party developer called Zipper Interactive. These three groups would work together and would go on to revolutionize the gaming landscape and make something that was aiming to be part simulator and part video game called SOCOM US Navy SEALs, a project that, in its time, helped push for a more realistic approach to storytelling and combat dynamics while also putting players in real-world rooted scenarios and situations, from hostage situations to bomb defusal to blowing up drug dens. This came in the PS2 era and differed from the popular first-person shooters of the time with a more over-the-shoulder viewpoint. This set up the player to be ready for action in strategic battlegrounds made to test both wits and patience. Or at least that's what most of the promotional material was saying. In reality, SOCOM was much more loose with the combat, where you could just run and gun through most situations to the point it almost feels like it would be, the fan favorite popular online engagements instead of the stealth action that other games such as Splinter Cell would go on to perfect later on. So what made SOCOM so beloved by fans and military vets alike? The answer to this lies in the structure of missions to which the player would be presented with a briefing, objectives, maps, target info, and of course a customizable loadout. In these briefings, the player would be shown every actionable piece of intel needed to complete each objective and with full voiceover be told what the mission details were and why the operation was handed to the likes of a Special Forces unit. This went a long way in not only setting up the missions, but making a presentation that immersed the player into the feeling of getting ready to go on the mission. It wasn't the first game to ever do this, but it definitely did an effective job nonetheless. The first playthrough of each mission is of course the most stealthy. You don't want to alert all the guards because first, you don't want to fail any stealth related objectives, but also second, you have a decent amount of health, but a realistic amount to where if you do go in guns blazing, you'll probably be shot down around the mid to late portions of the missions, or you may just fail the mission completely. This is not to say that you can't run and gun through the missions and basically speedrun them though. Once you know where enemy placements are, that's kind of what SOCOM turns into. On another note, it's both a really cool aspect and a bit of a pain that the missions feel like they last a long time, but there's also no checkpoints, at least in the first few SOCOM games. Like in real life, if you die, you're dead. So you have to be careful of getting shot at and or having your teammates get hit in the process also. It's at this point a very cool, almost one-of-a-kind gameplay technique comes into play.
We're in a surf zone going around, it's freezing cold, guys are laughing, making jokes, singing songs. And I think you have to have that kind of sick, twisted sense of humor to make it through buds.
The worse it gets, the more funny it is.
The guys here are some of the best guys in the world, I think. You cannot make it through this place by yourself.
Speaking of teammates, your squad is your family.
Salute me, familia. Salute.
No, not that type of family. I mean, these guys can both save you, plant explosives, be very clutch in gunfights, although sometimes they kind of suck also, and guard or evac objective characters such as prisoners or VIPs. The AI might not be the best, but it can't be understated the sheer amount of gameplay options available when you utilize AI squad mates. That's one of the fundamentals of SOCOM and what the real-life SEAL units rely on. Namely 2 words: teamwork. And with the inclusion of the let's call it TeamSpeak feature using the packaged-in Logitech headset, you could speak to your teammates. Yes, that's right. You could legit talk to your squad mates using the voice recognition commands, which sometimes would work better than Alexis or Bixby or Siri. Why is there so many AIs nowadays? Anyways, the AI would respond through the headset earpiece, making for the most immersive ever gunfights and tactics in gaming at the time. Like if you were online nowadays and telling your buddies to grab the objective while you shot at enemies or watch over the area while you scanned the room for intel, it was the first time I personally felt the immersion of a military game, and it helped cement my love for military shooters that would lead to, well, my name and branding. I think many people have a similar story to this as well, where SOCOM introduced a gateway to in-game comms where players otherwise really didn't want anything to do with that side of gaming. SOCOM came out in a time where not everyone had internet connected to their consoles, and even fewer were actually playing online on a regular basis. Before we talk about the online side of SOCOM, let's also take a look at how sound and lighting was a huge part of SOCOM's gameplay mechanics. A crucial part of the detailing of worlds was environmental lighting like street lamps, where things like weather and cars would mask sound. When you got down the correct route for each map, you could both shoot out lights and use the world's sounds to mask kill shots or create diversions that you could use to get a stealth kill. Again, similar to what Splinter Cell would also go on to perfect. These may be standard features in today's games, but back then it was a luxury because of how much system resources it would take up implementing those features to work in real time and not just be predetermined set pieces to add some action into the gameplay experience. Mix that with the DualShock controller for the PS2, which again was still a recently new feature to gaming at the time, and you had not only a realistic-based military shooter that you could feel the game via rumble function, it was the perfect combination of immersion for the player to make them feel like they were in the battlefield. The online part of SOCOM was something I personally missed out on because I didn't have an internet connection at the time. My first real online experience was Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare years later. Due to how hard it is to get working, I won't be showing my own footage of SOCOM's online features either, since the servers were all taken down back when AOL discs were still a thing. Okay, I kid, but you get what I mean. It's a lot of work to play SOCOM online, now that all the original servers have been shut down for, well, years now. From what I've seen of other SOCOM online experience, you could get a sense of what it was like from the latest Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 with the third-person mode that is available. In fact, the Call of Duty experience might be a bit better since SOCOM was very prone to having hackers destroy the competitive nature of online gaming, with God mode, wall hacks, and other sorts of cheating behaviors. Like they say on the ESRB, online experience may vary. And oh, it did. Again, the online experience in SOCOM was a ton of players' first ever gaming experience online, and while it may have been either hacked or just an extra mode, it did help the want for the next PlayStation to have a more online focused part of the PS3, and helped usher in the wave of what would now be main focus for devs of almost all modern genres, that being the online modes. I mean, Call of Duty or PUBG or Battlefield, without online capabilities, it's unheard of nowadays. It makes sense that a majority of players always say, I loved SOCOM and the online was so fun. And even though personally I loved the single player missions, both modes brought innovation to the genre that would be felt for the next decade in multiple series, no matter what platform you call your main. Okay, so we looked at what SOCOM is from a gameplay standpoint and how online played a big role in its popularity. Next up, let's look into what happened and why SOCOM hasn't been seen in over 10 years. To figure this out, we need to look back at who was responsible for the creation of SOCOM, that being a joint effort between SIA, U.S. Navy vets, and the dev team at the time, the now closed Zipper Interactive. Zipper was the driving force behind titles like MechWarrior 3, Crimson Skies, and both the PS3 exclusive MAG and PS Vita exclusive Unit 13, which would ultimately be their final project before being part of a resource realignment by Sony. And according to inside knowledge, there was a new SOCOM game in the works, along with a new first-person shooter title, but neither would see the light of day. Talking about a new SOCOM game, let's get into what the future of SOCOM could and maybe should look like. This is what I would like to call the blueprint part. The future of SOCOM should remain like all the other games, very realistic visually, with the level of detailing of the latest Call of Duty or even Resident Evil, while also using the tech that PlayStation Studios is known for when it comes to games such as Last of Us, Uncharted, or God of War, with face scanning and mocap working side by side to bring the characters to life. The latest example of the Sony tech at work that you can also look at is the visual quality of Callisto Protocol, which used Sony Visual Arts Studio to help create the lifelike character models you see both in-game and rendered in cutscenes. Not only should the faces be photorealistic, but also the gear, weapons, gadgets, and environments be all up to the same quality. If you're deployed into a city, you should feel the atmosphere of the city, with the unease and full attention it takes to survive in the situation at hand. If you're in the jungle, you should feel like there's 1,000 eyes watching you with every whisper of the wind and behind the rustle of leaves and animals circling around. All these environments mixed with 3D audio and DualSense would be the ultimate way of setting up a true memorable experience of being in the shoes of the Navy's finest and globetrotting around the world. The level of storytelling that happens in current PlayStation Studios titles could possibly even rival the action-packed thrill ride of a Call of Duty without feeling like a summer blockbuster movie. This could be done one of two ways. Either by the story being fully made up, but referencing versions of a real-life event, or it could be a documentary-styled storyline with actual soldier interviews mixed into the mission briefing to enhance the scenario even more. Think like a World War II style documentary, but with modern day tales. Either way, I think the majority of fans would want to see a more realism-rooted experience than a arcade shoot-'em-up like so many other games are now. Gameplay-wise, SOCOM should have a realistically weighted feel and stay away from arcade designs, meaning players moving with 2 to 3 frames of animation instead of instantly moving. Instant movements create for a more floaty feel, which take away from the immersion of the realism. Even the original games had some weight to the movements, and the soldiers' footsteps would be felt in the controls. Weapons and gadgets wise, the game should have all the currently realistically used weapons and gadgets, but also weapons that everyone knows well. There could be a nostalgia DLC pre-order bonus for the original SOCOM weapons, like an early 2000s M4A1 and Mark II pistol, to make up a DLC weapons pack. Weapons should hit hard and enemies should go down quick, like the original SOCOM feel had in engagements. Again, keep it realistic, but easy to pick up and learn, similar to how, say, the Call of Duty campaign design is for newer players. In the original SOCOM trilogy, enemies could be downed in a few rounds and even one shot to the head. Except, of course, if you play on the hardest difficulty, then yes, the enemies would be way more bullet spongy. The less time to kill, or TTK, made for a more powerful feeling experience overall. DualSense could also add to this, where each gun could have a different feel on the triggers, and bigger caliber guns have more feedback. The last major gameplay function should be the inclusion of audio commands, where, just like the other SOCOM games, you could control your squad mates via talking to them on the comms. This is and was an influential feature back in the PS2 days, and would make for some very cool single-player AI-driven moments to happen in this modern era. Lastly, it's time to talk about everybody's favorite subject, the online modes. Online modes is a tougher subject. There needs to be a competitive online experience, but the real question is which type. Should it be more TDM and objective-based game modes, or does SOCOM work with the current Battle Royale genre that has taken over the current multiplayer landscape? TDM, or Team Deathmatch, would cater towards the nostalgic original crowds that would check out the game with memories of PS2 era online battles. But Battle Royale would most likely, if done proper, would bring in the rest of the player base with a hopefully new approach but similar styling and elimination gameplay. My biggest concern about online is that the gameplay would be made more catered towards online instead of getting the base core of the gameplay rock solid for single player and then add a multiplayer component later. Yes, I mean after launch, similar to how Warzone 2 didn't launch with MW2 and Infinity Ward could focus on making the game engine work as good as it could before shifting focus to more online styled updates. That way, going forward, SOCOM has a solid foundation that whatever dev team works on it can fully utilize to reach full potential later on with more online-based game modes and updates instead of releasing the game and hoping for the best. Sure, they can do online betas to help test online connections, but they also need to make sure the core of the gameplay is up to par, and if not, even better than the shooters on the market of right now. After all, we all want SOCOM to be possibly better than most other games out there, so why not launch and then update the core gameplay and then have that lead to an even better gameplay experience for online? So after looking back on what SOCOM was originally to what it had become to what it could be in the future, I can safely say there's a ton of potential left on the table for some dev studio to pick up the pieces and create a new masterpiece that is worthy of the PlayStation Studios logo. Will we see a new entry into the SOCOM series? Will we see a remake, a remastering, or maybe a full-on reboot that leaves the old characters behind in favor of new and exciting personalities that can portray U.S. Navy SEALs and keep the honor and tribute to the armed forces intact? We can only hope, speculate, and nicely ask for a new entry into the series that hasn't seen a new title in just over a decade, and now 2 console generations. If the right dev team has the right game plan and can execute it to the level of attention and detail known in PlayStation Studios titles of today, SOCOM could make a tremendous comeback and cement a new military shooter into the lineup of AAA titles that are established on the PS4 and 5. Thank you for watching this history and blueprint for the future of SOCOM US Navy SEALs. I tried to implement a little something for both the fans and new devs that may work on a new game in the future. I hope to see the series revived, and for PlayStation fans to have a big budget AAA adventure semi-sim experience that we can all enjoy, but as of right now, One can only hope to see the return of this legendary series.